when you're brought to the masjid constantly and consistently as a young person, you feel like, I have a place here. And I think that's probably the most important thing that any father can do. What if I didn't get to travel enough? What if I didn't get to accomplish that goal that I really wanted to do all my life?
Yeah.
You do need to do some of those things before you settle down and start a family.
This video is kindly sponsored by Read Mentor School, which are an online independent Muslim school for children aged 6 to 16, where you can get the British National Curriculum full-time education alongside your Islamic values and Islamic studies. Do check them out on readmentorschool.com. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome back to another episode of the Dadhood podcast. Alhamdulillah, the community has been growing. We've got a lot more people in our WhatsApp community, a lot more subscribers on the YouTube. And also we have now started some more physical and in-person events that you can find out more about, inshallah, if you visit the website, dadhood.net. And yes, we've launched a new website as well. So you can check that out, inshallah. So for today, I've got a special friend with me. We've got Badees Nouiouat, who is originally from Algeria, as in his ethnic origin, but he's from all the way from the States. I don't think we've had somebody from the States on the podcast, but I'm gonna have to go back through the 50 episodes and see in case I offend somebody. But I think this is the first international guest on the Dadhood podcast. And before I forget to mention, yes, we've got our Dadhood merch now. So we're starting off with Dadhood hats. So if you want one, please do let me know. We've got a limited supply of these ones, and then inshallah we're going to be rolling out some new designs and more things coming, hoodies, coffee mugs, and anything that dads want, maybe for their kids or for themselves. We'll be rolling that out. Anyway, back to the guests. So we've got Badees, and it's really interesting how we met, and we'll go through that inshallah on the podcast as we explore what Badees does as in his professional life. But of course, we want to get into him being a very new dad. So let's get into it, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, Badees. How are you?
Alaikum assalam warahmatullah. I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you for coming on. And of course, we have to accommodate the time difference. So it's late for me, but it's inshallah a good time for you to be on the podcast. So you're hailing in from New York, is it?
Yes, New York City.
Mashallah, the Big Apple, as they say.
Yep. I'm based right across the river from Manhattan, so I'm in Queens.
Oh, perfect. Okay, amazing. So I want to get into that as well in terms of your experience living as a Muslim there, because given you're our first international guest, it'll be cool to understand what a dad's life could be like, or a Muslim dad could be like, in New York. But there's always a question that we start off with, Badees, on our podcast, which is, how many children do you have, and how old were you when you became a father?
So that's easy because I have one child. I just became a father. And yeah, one daughter. And I became a father at 26.
Allahu Barak, 26. Now, if you can tell all the viewers, what age were you when you got married?
I got married right 2 months after turning 18.
Allahu Barak. So I think you are you got married the earliest. I think I did have a guest that also got married around about 18, maybe 19, but I think you're the youngest in terms of when you got married. Now, this is really impressive, right? Because not a lot of couples, especially nowadays, get married that early. So let's start there. What was the decision in Badees' life to get married so early?
Yeah. So I would say, I grew up in a, tight-knit community based in Dallas, Texas. And, the way that communities are here in the U.S. is there's massive masajid where there's programs going on every day, every night. Weekends, people are there from Fajr to Isha. The masjid is never empty. You have multiple employees. So there's a youth director, there's an imam, assistant imam, so many roles that keep the masjid busy. And alhamdulillah, my father was a community organizer. That was his title. So anytime he was doing a program, I was the one who was volunteering, setting up the chairs, putting the table, getting the mic ready, whatever it was. And so because of that, I was able to run into my wife, who had just moved from Buffalo, New York. So across the country, far away, her father basically came to my dad at the masjid and said, "Hey, is there any way my kids can get involved?" And so early on, me and my wife met at a summer camp. So I was volunteering with my dad as usual, teaching the kids, and my wife was there as well. She was another tutor there. So we were around 16 at that time, and we knew that we wanted to get married, but obviously it was still early. And we worked well together. We had a good chemistry as co-workers here at this program, and it was in a good environment. We were at the masjid. There was a lot of other people around, so um, we were able to get to know each other in a halal way through that summer
Mm.
camp experience. And then so a couple years later, when we both had graduated high school, pretty much, we kind of talked to our parents and said, "Hey, how do we set this up?" And it was very smooth from there. Both of our parents on both sides were supportive, and we basically got married and then started going to university together.
Wow, mashallah, tabarakallah. So you ended up going to the same university as well. And did you study the
Yeah.
same course?
No, we were in different programs. But at that time we had basically moved out and we had our own apartment. So we had our life together. We'd go to school together.
Wow.
I had internships and part-time work going on to keep us going. So the early years were simple but nice years.
Wow, that's really beautiful, man. Because a lot of people struggle at that age, a young age where they definitely want to be in a relationship, right? And
Yeah.
it seems like the only way to get into a relationship with the opposite gender is to do it in the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, and for a lot of Muslims, it's not like they're intending to go and do it the wrong way. It just feels like the only option because marriage can feel like a burden. It can feel like a huge
Mm-hmm.
responsibility,
Yeah.
and and you're not sure whether you're ready for that, and you're not sure if your family will accommodate for that. And
Mm-hmm.
but that those barriers don't then stop the desire for wanting to be with the opposite gender, and so you
Mm-hmm.
end up going down the wrong route. So how did you both manage to go from the idea of, hey, we want to get married, to managing to get it done quite smoothly? Were both your parents and families very supportive? Was there any
Mm-hmm.
struggle in that?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have those high expectations of, you have to have an expensive wedding, you have to have own a house, you have to, be done with college, all these things that
Yeah.
people kind of place upon themselves. We kind of just said, we're gonna get there eventually, inshallah. And I did meet her father, and he asked me some questions, and but what he was looking more for was my seriousness and my commitment rather than me already bringing all these things with me. And I think that trust is important, to show, you do have to prove to her father that, yes, I will take care of her. But I think that also he showed some trust, and my parents also, they felt comfortable knowing me as, who I was, um, going out and starting my own life. And I think that um, trust from both sides is very important. And so we had a wedding at the masjid. There's a multi-purpose hall, kind of like a gym, but it's used for events and conferences
Right.
and things like that. And so we had a wedding there. The venue was free. We brought food. We bought food from a local restaurant, and we because we were able to do this at the masjid, we kind of left it an open invite to the community. And we have photos where some people may think like, oh, it has to be a super nice venue. It's a masjid. It's a multi-purpose hall. You can see like the stripes of the gym on the floor, but we made it as nice as we could, and we allowed the whole community to participate. So I would say like at least 1,000 people were there, and
Wow.
yeah, alhamdulillah. So many people, even years later, would come to me and be like, I was at your wedding and I don't even know who they are. So alhamdulillah, I think that's one way to do it, as long as both families are open to it.
Everything that you mentioned about how you got married, and even the marriage itself. It reminds you a lot about how I got married, because I met my wife at the Islamic Society during university, the MSA. And that's a great way to get to know your potential spouse. You have to work on projects together. You have to have patience with
Hmm.
each other. You have to figure out each other's personalities on how this person works in a particular team or a particular project. And but it's also a halal environment where you're not
Hmm.
overstepping certain boundaries, you're not doing things in private.
Yeah.
So it's a really good way to meet other people that you could potentially get married to. And then in terms of the marriage itself, we also just hired out a like a community hall that is used
Hmm.
for multiple different things. And we did our best to make it look nice, but yeah, like you said, you could still see certain things on the floor in the background and things like that. And
Yeah.
we kept it quite small, to be honest. I mean, mashallah, I'm really happy to hear like how you opened up to the community, and 1,000 people came, and that's beautiful, because I think that's close to the sunnah as well, in terms of just inviting the whole village or the whole community down, right, to celebrate.
Hmm.
We kept ours really, really small. And we just had like a few of our family members there, but that's also
Nice.
something that is I would say is good to be moderate as well, in terms of
Hmm.
what you did is not to see you not moderate, is the way that you went about. I think was really good, and obviously you did it according to your needs and your affordability and things like this. And the fact that you're able to get the venue for free obviously allowed for you to spend a lot more on
Yeah.
food for guests and things like that, right? So it probably
Yeah.
worked out the same as somebody who paid loads and then had like a small amount of people.
Yeah.
So I think it's really beautiful, to be honest. And that is like the moment where the fatherhood really starts. We were saying,
Mm.
like, the fatherhood starts earlier in pregnancy, and you mentioned that to me earlier today, but I think it actually starts when you choose your spouse, and
Mm.
and
Yeah.
and what decisions you make as a couple,
Yeah.
from the moment of marriage onwards. That's
Yeah.
really where it starts, because that sets the tone of what life will be like with this woman or with this man, and how are we going to bring children into the picture.
Yeah.
And that's the first right that your children have over you, is who their mother or who their father is going to be, right? and,
Exactly. Yeah.
and so which spouse that you choose. So
Hmm.
even before your children are in the picture, they already have a right over you, that you have to make sure that you choose this in the right way. And the fact
Yeah.
that your wife was accepting of this method of marriage, in the sense of doing things halal, and getting married early, and having the wedding in not such an extravagant way, that shows you what kind of woman you're marrying,
Hmm. Hmm.
what kind of mother potentially that this woman would be. So
Yeah.
I think it's quite relevant, to be honest, to the story of being a dad and becoming a father.
Hmm.
Is what you've explained there.
Yeah.
Okay, look, you're 18 years old now. You're in university now. Amazing. You've already got a lot of people, when they get to university, unfortunately they go about relationships the wrong way, and that's where people start exploring. Now, alhamdulillah,
Mm.
you have a halal outlet for your relationship, and you and your wife can get to know each other at this young age. You can grow with each other.
Hmm.
But is it not scary that you could potentially, she could potentially fall pregnant, and you could potentially have children? Like, what were your thoughts there about having children at such a young age, or as you guys have done, is potentially delayed it?
Yeah. Sometimes things happen, and that's like qadarullah. But you can also plan, and we wanted to wait until it was a more appropriate time for having kids. And something I have thought about and I've told people is, I think we as a society, we make marriage such a big issue, and we delay so much until we're ready for marriage. But as a society, not only just Muslims but everyone, when it comes to kids, it's like, oh, oops, we had a kid. And I think that we need to flip it, where we need to be much more easier in getting married, remove the barriers, find a spouse, because it's just someone that you're going to live with and someone you're going to be a partner of. It doesn't stop your life to get married. You can go to school, you can go to work, you can build your career, you can write books, you can, start a podcast, you can travel, you can do so many things while married. And literally, it will not stop you at all. However, having kids is now a commitment. It's now
Mm,
something, someone who relies upon you completely, not another independent adult who you're living with, but a child who cannot care for itself. And I think that's where you have to plan for. That's where you have to wait until it's the right time. Not necessarily financially, because we're not told to put it off financially, but just when you feel that I'm ready to step up and be a father or be a mother, I think that's when we should start thinking about having kids. So really, when when you see Muslim people delaying marriage, and then once they get married, they're like, okay, now we're a little bit older, we have to have kids right away. You
right.
don't really have the time to connect with your spouse. You go from, not knowing this person that well to suddenly now you're both constantly,
Mm,
trying to raise this child. And that doesn't give you the time to kind of learn about each other and connect with each other, and have that quality time that really develops your relationship. Because when you have a kid, you and your spouse are not going to have the same free time to get to know each other, right? You're going to go through a phase where both of you are just completely busy, completely tired. And if you haven't built up the equity in your relationship, then it might unravel just because of that time of having kids, of how hard it is. So if you give yourself time to build up that equity, so that even though you lost time with each other after having the kid, you already built it up in the bank, sort of. You
mm,
guys built a strong relationship. You know each other intimately, really well, personality wise, everything. You know what they like, you know what they don't like, you know how they like to live, all these things. So that it's when you have a phase, let's say the newborn phase is like a crisis. When you're in the crisis, you don't need to explain everything. You know this person, it's like the yin and yang. You know how each other work, and you don't really even really need to communicate too much, because you just go straight into action. You see, so I think that really people need to, lower the barriers to getting married, but be very intentional about when you want to start your family, when you want to have kids, inshallah.
inshallah. That's a really beautiful way of looking at it, bro. Because yeah, people automatically think once I'm married, that means I have to have kids. So in order for me to get married, I need to be prepared for the child, which means I probably
Hmm.
need to have a roof over my head. I probably need to have certain savings in place. I probably
Hmm.
need to have a plan of what it means to be a parent and be ready for all of that kind of stuff. And you put all of this pressure on yourself that isn't necessary for the marriage itself and for
Exactly,
for,
yeah.
for having a partner. And I think it's really good advice to explore the relationship with your spouse before actually having children.
Hmm.
um and and to be honest, this is, a lot of people, they delay marriage because they go about the relationship with the maybe Western standards, in the sense that, okay, marriage means we're at the peak of our relationship, and the peak of
Hmm.
our relationship means that, that means now we can, have children because we're at the peak of our relationship, and this is
Hmm.
where all of the kind of the most important thing is going to happen at that point. But
Hmm.
in our situation, that's not necessarily the case, because we can't have those prior years before marriage to be able to
Yeah.
get to the peak. The peak happens a lot later into the marriage, in the most
Yeah.
traditional sense. If you think about the most ideal Islamic halal marriage, really the first moment isn't the peak moment. The marriage isn't actually the peak. The marriage is
Yeah.
actually what we would call in the Western sort of type of relationship is like the, just the dating phase. In reality, the cat is like the dating phase, and
Yeah.
then you eventually build and build and build until you get to this peak, and you're like, wow, we really do love each other, and we do
Yeah.
really want to
Exactly.
spend our rest of our life together. So boom, let's now all do all the important stuff, having the
Hmm.
kids, buying a house together, and whatever else it is.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people forget that is the way that you can do it. Like, the marriage point isn't the be all and the end all and the peak, and you can just start off like that. And there's no,
Hmm.
it's probably taboo to say this, but I think there's probably no issue with, if that marriage doesn't work out, it not working out is okay. And
Yeah.
you having to go your separate ways and find a spouse that you feel like you can live with and have children with,
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
probably actually okay. Now I know there's probably
Yeah.
nuances there. You know, we don't want to encourage people just to get married willy nilly and just, oh, we're gonna try
Yeah.
things out, and then because obviously
Yeah.
then there's all the other things about the responsibility of what it means to be partners in a marriage, and that
Yeah.
if things aren't working out, that you work on it and you work hard on it to try and
Yeah.
make sure it does work out. And if you need
Yeah.
counseling, you go through counseling, and you do all of those things to keep that marriage together and make sure that it blossoms. So we're not
Hmm.
saying, okay, yeah, you know, nikah is
Yeah.
nothing. You could just use it as like a gateway to dating.
Yeah.
We're not saying that, but what we are saying is that, you know, don't put all of those pressures on you to think that the beginning of the nikah is the peak of the relationship. And now I have to, as soon as
Hmm.
I get married, I have to do all of these things, or I have to prepare all of these things before I can even get married. And I
Exactly.
think, yeah, I think what you've done is it's quite unique, to be honest. Even, you know, it's sad to say that it's quite unique, because I think the way that you've gone about it is the way that makes the most sense from an Islamic perspective. It makes the most sense. Um, you know, just for the success of a successful marriage. And unfortunately, this should be more commonplace, and it's not. But I'm glad that you've shared that to try and help, because we do have a lot of, you know, brothers that are watching this who aren't married yet. Like, I don't know
Hmm.
why they're watching a father's podcast yet, but you know, but I think it's good, you know, because like I come across so many brothers that are like, oh yeah, I watch your podcast. I'm like, what? I didn't know
Oh
you
well.
were married. He's like, I'm not married, bro. Oh, okay, that's good then. Take notes, take notes for the
Yeah.
future. So
Take
I think
notes.
it's
Yeah.
good. So I think inshallah this will help a lot of people.
Inshallah.
Okay, so at what point do you and your wife realize now's the right time then?
Yeah. I think something that people, you don't want to do something too early to where you later feel like, I feel like I didn't live enough before. And
Yeah,
that's a big thing that a big fear that a lot of people have, is that, what if, I never, what if I didn't get to travel enough? What if I didn't get to accomplish that goal that I really wanted to do all my life?
yeah,
And I think that you do need to do some of those things before you settle down and start a family. But like I said, getting married won't stop you at all, because you can't say like, "Oh, I wish I traveled before getting married." Like, why didn't you travel after with your spouse? There's no thing that's stopping you from traveling with your spouse. But when you have a kid, now you have to plan the whole trip around your kid, right? So it's a far more important to do some of those things, kind of like get it out of your system a little bit before you start having kids. And I will say that we both, we finished college, we started working, we traveled, we did a few things that were on our bucket list. Like, I wrote a couple of books. I did this trip where I traveled to multiple countries and documented the Muslim community in different cities. And these kind of projects made me feel like, you know what, Alhamdulillah, I do have started somewhat of a legacy, um, that now I can start having kids, and I can feel like, there was a phase of my life where I accomplished things that I always wanted to do. Um, and so, alhamdulillah, by the age of 26, I was starting to think. By the age of 25, I was starting to think, you know what, me and my wife, we know each other well. We've been married for a long time. At that point, it had been 7 years. I did some of these things that since I was a child I wanted to do, like writing a book. Um, and so now the stage is set for me. Now it's like, okay, I'm ready for the next level of being a human being.
mhm,
And I think it really is a new level of being a human being, because when after you become a parent, um, it's kind of like, the pregnancy and birth phase is kind of like the boot camp,
yeah,
where you fully immerse yourself in studying, what is, symptoms of pregnancy, how can I help my wife through that, what are the stages of birth, what can I do to relieve her pain, and then also you start studying early childhood development. All these things you start studying are things that you never would have thought to study before. And when you look around, let's say, like, your old buddies who you used to hang out with, and you come back to them after studying all these things, and your brain has, like, completely shifted. You've completely immersed yourself into something that they have never thought about. And I think that's when you realize the difference between, like, parents and people who aren't parents yet.
mm,
It's a new phase of being a human being. Like, you are now somebody who's a caretaker, and you're not somebody who's walking around individually focused, independent. and not really having people relying on you. And so I think that you have to take that step when you feel ready, but also you don't have to delay and worry about what's going to happen. You have to feel confident that, you know, I'm ready for the next stage. This is where I'm at in life, and I'm ready for the next stage.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I definitely resonate with that feeling of, wanting being able to see what that next stage is, and like, okay, I'm now going for that. And
Hmm.
but I do wish that I would have ticked off a lot more from my bucket list that you have done. Mashallah, tabarakallah. Let's go into that a
Alhamdulillah.
little bit. So it's funny how we met, right? You were coming over to the UK to continue your series of visiting Muslim communities in different cities across the world, and you'd come now to London to carry that project on. And of
Hmm.
course, in London, we do have, of course, number one, a huge Muslim community, but also we have a lot of organizations. And one of those very popular organizations was Islam Channel. And at that time, I was working there. You
Yeah.
were already coming to Islam Channel to do some filming and to also be featured on one of our shows. And so,
Hmm.
I ended up being the guy that showed you around. And
Yeah.
I guess we hit it off a bit, and you thought it'd be a good idea to get me to interview me for the documentary. And
Yeah.
alhamdulillah, I had a really good time. And we'll link that, inshallah, so everyone can watch that
Okay.
documentary that you put out, inshallah.
Oh,
Really interesting insights into the different people that you met, Tariq Hussein, and going to various different areas,
yeah.
exploring the different Muslim communities. I think people really enjoy seeing that. So is that kind of documentary making, filmmaking, is that something that um at that time, was that like your full-time thing? Was that a hobby? And what are you doing right now for work and for side
Hmm.
projects?
Yeah. So I've always had, like, you know, something going on the side for me. Even when I was back in college, I had like a shirt company called Ihsan Company, and
Nice.
I had a popular design which is like, it said Salah, and it had like a little silhouette of a man in each position of Salah.
Ooh,
And it
you got
was
any
a
dead stock?
I might have some, but yeah, it's been a long time since I started that. But you know, at the time, I was, you know, sending shirts to people for free, like influencers. I had Khabib wearing one of my shirts.
Oh wow.
So it was pretty fun. But yeah, alhamdulillah, even like the documentaries and the books, like all this, I've been working on parallel to like other, you know, pursuits. I've worked like different jobs, sometimes remotely, sometimes in office here after I moved to New York. Um, Currently, I do have like a remote situation, which is really good
For
for,
sure.
you know, having a baby at home.
For sure.
Um, but yeah, I mainly work in like marketing, public relations, communications, these kind of things. So you know, the other stuff I do is somewhat parallel, um, but at the same time, you know, it's also something that I kind of pour more of my Islamic identity into, which I think like I needed an outlet, you know,
Yeah.
to contribute to the community and to use whatever creativity I had to create something valuable.
I think what's really interesting is you mentioned earlier that your father was in a position like, would you say head of community or something like
Yeah,
that, was it? Yeah.
yeah.
So sorry, so what was it? What was the title?
Uh, Community organizer.
Community organizer, right? In your local area in Dallas, right?
Yeah.
Um, so clearly that bug
Hmm.
was that sort of passed down to you, right? And
Yeah.
you sort of grabbed that and you took that, and clearly, all these different projects that you're doing related to the Muslim community maybe are being modeled after or are coming from the passion that your father had. And again, that's
Yeah.
another lesson for us as fathers, is that we can
Hmm.
really role model these things for our children as they're growing up. We can drag them along, as your dad did, to the masjid and volunteer at the events, put the chairs and the tables out, and
Yeah.
soak in that environment of being at service to the community. And that will only build good memories and passion for these kind of
Hmm.
things for our children to then carry that on and continue serving the ummah. And as
Yeah.
a father, that's what you want to see. You want to see that your children can carry on that legacy and do those things which are good for you
Yeah.
as a dad, and then good for them as
Hmm.
children as they carry on in this world.
Yeah.
How much of an influence would you say then that your father has had on your pursuits and your passions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think being dragged to the masjid at a young age is something that's very formative, because you're now comfortable in these spaces and you feel a little bit of ownership over the space, to where if you're I saw many times people who come later on and they don't have much of an attachment, and then someone tells them off, or they have a bad experience and they're turned away from the masjid. And
Mm,
that can be a problem because nobody owns the masjid. The community should be something that welcomes everybody. And so when you're brought to the masjid constantly and consistently as a young person, you feel like I have a place here. And I think that's probably the most important thing that any father can do, is to take their child with them to the masjid. And alhamdulillah, I was near a masjid where there was a lot of programs, which the more active a masjid is, the better it is for the youth. Because they need the stimulation, they need the even if you have like something fun going on, you have like a pizza party, you have like a halal movie night, you have a basketball hoop somewhere in the parking lot, something that keeps the youth engaged. I think that these things are so important. And then my father became the community organizer after nearly 20-year career as an engineer. So I was already like 13, 14 when he started working. And so I was able to kind of experience the masjid in a different way when he started getting involved, because now everyone knows my father, and everyone's like, oh, your dad, he's always here, he's always doing so much. And that gives you a feeling of pride, and a feeling of I want to be someone who provides value to other Muslims like that. Um, and it's funny because anybody can do these things, even as a volunteer. Just because your masjid doesn't have some program going on, like you can be someone who starts it. And that's something that I saw, is that there's people who they just roll their sleeves up. The masjid is like an open book. You I mean, not an open book, like an open arena where you can just
sure.
start
Yeah.
things, as long as there's no like gatekeeper uncles who say, this is my masjid, I control everything here. But normally, like, if you want to get involved, you want to provide something to the community, you can do it. And I think that we all need to take a little bit more of like that ownership and that drive to give, not just take. We often come to the masjid looking to take, and I think that there's a lot more opportunity to be a giver, and that benefits you as well.
That's beautiful, bro. Jazakallah khair for sharing that. And inshallah, I hope this inspires fathers to do as much as they can in the community, in the local community, so that they can role model that for their children. Because there will
Hmm.
come a time when you're going to ask yourself, why is my child not attached to the masjid? Or what can I do to attach my child to the masjid? I'm not
Hmm.
saying that they're a bad child, but sometimes they just can't be bothered,
Yeah.
to make their way to the masjid. And the earlier that you start your connection with the masjid, the easier it's going to become to
Hmm.
encourage your child. And you don't even have to do anything, like I'm sure you probably just saw your father being involved,
Hmm.
and then you just felt the natural inclination to also go and be there. Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
sometimes he would have dragged you, but I'm sure there were times when it didn't feel
Yeah.
forced. It was just a natural thing, right?
Yeah.
um Okay, so I know we do need to wrap up very soon, but before we do that, I definitely need to go through your journey as a father for the past 2 months, but also prior, during the pregnancy. So tell me, like, how did the pregnancy go?
Yeah.
Because I know you said, like, you learned quite a lot about the
Hmm.
process, you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier. So I just want to see kind of how that went. What did you learn? And also what's been like a highlight of the past couple months of just seeing this new bundle of joy in your daughter?
Alhamdulillah. Yeah. I would say the pregnancy was really rough for my wife. There's every pregnancy is different. I feel like there's no one way that it goes, and that's why learning is so important about how it could go. because then when something happens, you can be like, okay, this is happening. Okay, this is happening. For example, the first 3 months, very common for the woman to have what's called morning sickness.
Mm.
Although it's a misnomer because it's kind of like all day sickness, and it's like a very strong, it's a very strong nausea. And for my wife, it was a very tough, at least the first 4 months, pretty much daily, strong feelings of nausea. And in those times, it's like there's not much you can do to relieve the symptoms, but you have to find ways to help in other ways, right? And I think that's the job of a father, is to look for, there's always going to be something you can't do. For example, even when the baby's here, you can't breastfeed the baby, but there's always something else you can do, and that's where you need to kind of step up. And alhamdulillah, the after the first 4 months, the pregnancy got much better. um and then, but then, as you get into the later stages, then the due date starts looming over your head. How is birth going to be? And I think that this is again another huge opportunity for you to open the books, to open the YouTube playlist, to listen to some podcasts and educate yourself. Because one thing that the doctor told us, and also other people have mentioned that I know personally, is that, for a lot of fathers, the being in the room during birth is almost traumatizing. And there's stories of people fainting, there's stories of people just being really like shaken by it. And you know for me, alhamdulillah, like there was you know there was nothing surprising for me, because I had like really opened the books and I had really studied like what can happen, what are the stages of labor, what happens in the first stage, what happens in the second stage. There's so much for you to educate yourself about. And when knowledge is power and knowledge is strength, because when when you can identify, okay, this is happening, it's not a crisis, it's not, you see a little bit of blood and you're not surprised. You see this situation or that situation arise and you're not surprised, because you know what's happening. So the knowledge is the first half of it, and the second half of it is finding ways to help. Because oftentimes, the father, he's kind of just standing in the corner while the nurses and the doctors do all the work. But there's so many ways you can help even during birth to relieve your wife's pain. And there's multiple methods that we studied before. We filled the bag full of things like tennis balls and yoga balls and all these things that can help relieve pain. And what we found worked was putting counter pressure. So counter pressure is kind of like, as a baby is coming out, there's a lot of pressure opening outwards. If you push back from the back, you just push inwards, it relieves the pain really well. At least it did for my wife. And so pretty much every time she had a contraction, I was jumping in there, pushing, pushing. And contractions, the labor was like over 24 hours. So,
Wow.
basically you're just, my back was tired, my arms were tired, but that feeling of tiredness allowed me to also be part of the experience, and to
Mm.
not feel like I'm just observing my wife go through pain, but we're in it together, and I'm helping, I'm not just watching. And I think that's a huge thing. So, the part one I recommend to fathers is the knowledge part. So what you're seeing doesn't surprise you. And the second part is learning how you can help. Every woman, there's going to be a different method of what relieves her pain. But you have to figure that out, and you have to, roll your sleeves up, and you have to jump in. And I think once you do these two things, there's no surprise. You're not going to be traumatized, at least inshallah, if everything, there's no major crises. But you're gonna feel like you're part of this experience, and it will be a lot easier on you, inshallah.
What would you say to Muslim men who say that's not the place of a man to be there, to be experiencing that, to give that kind of support that you're giving?
Yeah. Yeah, we have to look at it this way. We're living in the West. We don't have the same village that people had back in our home countries. You are the number one person to support your wife. If she doesn't have her mothers and sisters and cousins and aunts who are all giving the village experience, and sharing the knowledge that the experience that they had provides like this kind of cultural knowledge that they can share and give tips on, and all support each other. But when you're somebody who's living in the West, and we live in these nuclear families, right? Like, you are the number one pillar of support. And if your wife has, plenty of support, then maybe you can step back in a way and, play your role. But I think that to completely give your wife to the medical system and just be like, I'm just going to stay over here and let it happen. I don't think that's right. Because we often also have this like misunderstanding that this is just completely natural and it's just going to run its course. Well, yes, it is natural, but it's also one of the hardest things you can ever do. And so, if you're going through something extremely hard, then, like, let's say you broke your leg, and then you say, oh, healing is natural, it'll just, the bones will fuse back together. Like, do you still need somebody who's going to help you get up, who's going to bring you like warm food, who's going to bring you water, who's going to give you emotional support? Yes, you do need that. And so I think that just because it's natural doesn't mean that there's not a huge role of support that you can play. And if there is no village, then you have to be that village.
Jazakallah khair. Really, really powerful words there. And just to end off, bro, can you give me a very quick snippet on a really nice highlight that you've had so far in this brand new journey of being a dad?
Yeah. Let's see. I think the first thing is, my mom did visit us and stayed with us for a few weeks after the birth. And I haven't lived with my mom since I was 18, since we moved out. And so, alhamdulillah, it was an experience where I kind of rediscovered like this like living relationship with my mother. And there were things that she had forgotten about me. There's things I had forgotten about her. And I had grown, I was at 18 until now. I had actually even physically grown, gotten taller, gotten, heavier. And I think that being able to reconnect with my mother was a big thing. And she was so supportive. She was so helpful. That goes back to, that village where, historically we have had that, but now in our societies, we've kind of disconnected ourselves. And so it's really important to kind of rebuild those relationships and build strong relationships with our closest family members. But also, just, the first time, seeing your daughter smile to you, the first time, just like taking her outside and showing her, the world, these kind of things are some of the beautiful moments that I've experienced with my baby so far. But I would say, the newborn stage has been rough, but things are getting better. I would say about around 7 weeks, things started to get better. She started to see us more. She started to laugh and smile. And these are, I'm very looking forward to, the journey as it goes forward, inshallah.
Allahumma barak. I have to say, you're probably the most well-rested looking father for a somebody who's just been a father for 2 months. Allahumma barak. So
Alhamdulillah.
mashallah, I think you take your health quite seriously, it looks like. May Allah
Alhamdulillah.
subhanahu wa ta'ala bless your family, your wife, your daughter,
Ameen.
yourself, and
Ameen.
all the projects that you're involved in. Jazakallah khair for giving us your time, Badees.
Yeah.
And inshallah, we look forward to having you back on the podcast soon. Maybe when your daughter's older, maybe inshallah when you have more children, and then you can share with us some more wisdom. Barakallahu feek. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Barakallahu feekum. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
All right, guys. So if you enjoyed that video, please do subscribe and follow me on TikTok and Instagram for more dad-related content. Check out some of my previous videos and look forward to the next ones.